Hello, my name is Meerah, and I am a lore keeper in one of Yog Sothoth's libraries, and today I'm going to actually be telling you about Yog Sothoth. I do still get questions about who or what he is when people watch my videos. So Yog Sothoth is actually what Lovecraft considered to be one of his most important characters and deities, so much so that he actually called his entire mythos by the name Yog Sothothery. Nowadays, Cthulhu is the poster child for Lovecraftian-related content. Yog Sothoth knows the gate. Yog Sothoth is the gate. Yog Sothoth is the key and the guardian of the gate. Past, present, future, all are one in Yog Sothoth. He knows where the old ones broke through of old, and where they will break through again. He knows where they have trod Earth's fields, and where they still tread them, and why no one can behold them as they tread. Yog Sothoth, as do all Lovecraftian entities, has a great many names. He's called the Opener of the Way, the Lurker at the Threshold, the Key and the Gate, the Beyond One, the All-in-One, and the One-in-All, and the All-Encompassing, just to name a few of his names. Yog is an outer god that is omniscient and all-knowing. It is heavily implied that he's actually locked outside of the known universe and sees and knows all of space and time at once. There are no secrets hidden from Yog Sothoth. His origin is all of space and time, and he was born from the Nameless Mist. His grandfather is Azathoth. His offspring are Wilbur Whately, the Dunwich Abomination, Nug Yeb, and Hastur. His grandchildren are Cthulhu and Sothoth. His two known mates are Shub the All-Mother and Lavinia Whately. He first appears in H.P. Lovecraft's The Case of Charles Dexter Ward, and is the driving force in the story The Dunwich Horror. But the only story in which Yog Sothoth seems to actually speak is through the gates of the Silver Key. His appearance varies wildly depending on who perceives him, but the general consensus is that he is composed of writhing tentacles and iridescent glowing orbs, or eyeballs, of which there are 13. Their names are Gomori, Zogan, Citri, Eligor, Durzin, Balal, Skor, Algor, Sephon, Partus, Gamor, Umbra, and Anaboth. In one case involving the town of Dunwich, Yog Sothoth is known to have been summoned for the purpose of impregnating a human female, Lavinia Whately, who gives birth to his two partially human children. Another case of a ritual by the Yog Sothoth's cult involves the deity using essential salts of a deceased individual to resurrect them from the dead. While he has been called upon and summoned a handful of times by his cultists on Earth, he has also been known to grant terrible knowledge to a select few. A human named Randolph Carter is one of them. The following is a quote from Through the Gates of the Silver Key by H.P. Lovecraft. Now with the passing of two gates, you wish loftier things. You would not flee like a child from a scene disliked to a dream beloved, but would plunge like a man into that last and inmost of secret which lies behind all scenes and dreams. What you wish, I have found good, and I am ready to grant that which I have granted 11 times only to beings on your planet. 5 times only to those you call men, or those resembling them. I am ready to show you the ultimate mystery, to look on which is to blast a feeble spirit. Yet before you gaze full on that last and first of secrets, you may still wield a free choice, and return, if you will, through the two gates, the veil still unrent for your eyes. And yeah, that's a little blurb about Yog Sothoth. And today I'm going to tell you the story of Azathoth from the Yog Sothothery, or the Lovecraft mythos. Azathoth is known as many things to those that do know of its existence. The nuclear chaos, the blind idiot god, the abyssal idiot, lord of all, him in the gulf, the deep dark, the cold one, the sleeping chaos, supreme lord and creator of all things, and the blind dreamer, just to name a few. As you may have noticed, there's a wide variety of names there, and not all of them are very flattering. There is no definitive physical description of Azathoth, because everyone envisions him differently, and he is always changing. Azathoth is an outer god and a supreme omnipotent being. Azathoth is a primordial, immortal, and exists outside of reality. While he has no parents, he has many young. Nyarlathotep, the Darkness, and the Nameless Mist, to name probably the most notable. The following is a quote from the Dream Quest of Unknown-Kadath by H.P. Lovecraft. Outside the ordered universe is that amorphous blight of nethermost confusion, which blasphemes and bubbles at the center of all infinity. The boundless daemon Sultan Azathoth, whose name no lips dare speak aloud, and who gnaws hungrily in inconceivable, unlighted chambers beyond time and space, amidst the muffled, maddening beating of vile drums and the thin, monotonous whine of accursed flutes. Azathoth is namely known for the creation of all things. so, you know, he's kind of important. In his eternal slumber, his dreams become the reality that we know. Those in his court constantly play pipes and flutes and drums to keep him asleep. Other accounts say that Azathoth rules all of reality from the center of the universe, the ultimate void of chaos, on its black throne. And ultimately, that's all we really know about Azathoth. He is perhaps one of the most mysterious and perplexing of Lovecraft's characters. So yeah, sorry this video is kind of short. Despite the fact that Azathoth is probably one of Lovecraft's most reoccurring and important deities, he's purposefully only discussed in like hushed tones and cryptic verse. The god's first recorded appearance was in a note Lovecraft wrote to himself in 1919 that simply said Azathoth. Hideous name. And that's it. Today I'm going to tell you the story about Shub the All-Mother from the Yog Sothoth, or the Lovecraft mythos. Now first, I need to address her name. Obviously, the full name hasn't aged so well, so I will just be calling her Shub, or the All-Mother. Okay, cool. Glad we got that out of the way. Shub the All-Mother is an outer goddess in the Lovecraft pantheon. Like all the deities in the mythos, she has many names. Black Goat with 1,000 young, the All-Mother, Mother Goddess, Lord of the Woods, and the Mighty Mother are her most commonly used. She comes from the Black Nebula, and her father is literally listed as the Darkness. She's a fertility goddess and has been described as an evil cloud-like entity or an amorphous mass which extrudes black tentacles, slime-dripping mouths, and short, writhing goat legs. Small creatures are constantly being spat forth from the monstrosity. She is mates with Yog Sothoth, which her union with produced the twins Nug and Yeb. She is also a mate to the not-to-be-named one, also known as Hastur or the King in Yellow. She is believed to have spawned Ithaca, Zar, and Loigor with him. Hastur may also be the father of Shub's 1,000 young, or the Dark Young, though that is not confirmed, and it is entirely possible that they were spawned via fission. Two other named children spawned by Shub are Rhan-Tegoth and Igarta, though their fathers are unknown. She is the grandmother of Cthulhu. The Dark Young of Shub are horrifying pitch-black monstrosities comprised of ropey tentacles. They are said to stand between 12 and 20 feet tall, and like their mother, have several pairs of stumpy hoofed legs. From a distance, they resemble trees, and they usually dwell in the woodlands wherever Shub's cult is active. Dark Young are usually called upon to preside over those cult's ceremonies. They can act as proxies for their mother and accept sacrifices and worship on her behalf, devouring non-cultists and spreading their mother's faith, just in general. The milk of Shub is also said to have special properties, and those that drink it are mutated into monstrous hybrid creatures. Of all the deities in the Lovecraft pantheon, Shub is probably the most extensively worshipped. She has many cults. Her worshippers include the Hyperboreans, the Movians, people of Sarnath, and several druidic and barbaric cults throughout human history. She's also worshipped by several non-human species, such as the fungi of Yoggoth and the Nug Yeb of Yith. It is said that with the proper materials, the All-Mother can be summoned to any woodlands during a new moon. Shub's dwelling place or home realm is unknown. Some speculate that she lives beneath the planet of Yith, or in the court of Azathoth at the center of the universe, or in another dimension altogether. Some believe that she came to Earth in prehistoric times and built the city of Harag-Boloth in a cavern beneath southern Arabia, and that the cavern and the city exist conterminously there's your word of the day, with Yadith, and are dimensionally linked. And that's it! And today, I wanted to tell you the story of Cthulhu from the Yog Sothoth, or the Lovecraft mythos. He is arguably the most famous of all entities from Lovecraft's work, and he first appeared in 1928. As do all of the entities in Lovecraft's work, Cthulhu has a lot of titles and names. Perhaps the most well-known ones are High Priest of the Great Old Ones, the Great Dreamer, the Sleeper of Earlier, the Starspawn, Him Who Lies Dreaming, Lord of the Watery Abyss, and Him Who Will Rise Again. He was born on Vori in the 23rd Nebula. His great-grandfather is Azathoth, his grandfather is Yog Sothoth, and grandmother is Shub the All-Mother. His parent is Nog. He has a brother, Narki, and sister Kasogtha, and half-sister Pythagia, and half-brother Hastur the Unspeakable. His known mates are Idya, and because no pantheon is complete without some incest, Kasogtha. His offspring are quote-unquote many, but just to name a few, Cthulhu, Leviathan, Teeth, Zog, Zothamog, Yith, and so on. There was a lot. Cthulhu is a busy guy. Cthulhu is described as being a hybrid of human, dragon, and octopus. He is often depicted with a humanoid form, an octopus-like head, and the wings of a dragon. He has the ability to change his body proportions at will, a trait that is shared with his daughter, Cthulhu. All Great Old Ones are telepathic and know all that is occurring in the universe, which could be attributed to being descended from Yog Sothoth, who is also all-knowing. Cthulhu specifically is known for having communicated with the first humans by molding their dreams and developing a cult for his own worship. To this day, Cthulhu's cult is one of the strongest of any in the Lovecraft mythos. And of course, one cannot mention Cthulhu without mentioning his great city, Earlier. It was an island city built with non-Euclidean architecture and geometry somewhere in the southern Pacific Ocean. Following are quotes from H.P. Lovecraft. The Nightmare Corp city of Earlier was built in measureless eons behind mystery by the vast, loathsome shapes that seeped down from the dark stars. There lay great Cthulhu and his hordes hidden in green slimy vaults until the end. Then suddenly the lands of the Pacific sank again, taking with them the frightful stone city of Earlier and all the cosmic octopi, so that the Old Ones were again supreme on the planet except for one shadowy fear, about which they did not like to speak. Earlier sank beneath the waves for reasons that are unknown to us, though the common theory is that it was due to a cosmic event, or perhaps due to the Star Spawn's war with Yithians or the Elder Things. But what we do know is that it did sink, and for millennia, Cthulhu and his spawn have laid interred in the city. According to the cult, they lay sleeping and dreaming, and one day, when the stars have aligned properly again, Earlier will rise once more and Cthulhu will awaken. The following is a quote from the character Castro in H.P. Lovecraft's Call of Cthulhu. At the proper time, the secret priests would take great Cthulhu from his tomb to revive his subjects and resume his rule of the earth. Then mankind would have become as the Great Old Ones, free and wild and beyond good and evil, with laws and morals thrown aside, and all men shouting and killing and reveling in joy. Then the liberated Old Ones would teach them new ways to shout and kill and revel and enjoy themselves. And all of the earth would flame with a holocaust of ecstasy and freedom. And that's it. This obviously is just a very basic overview of who and what Cthulhu is, as with most of my Lovecraftian videos. And today, I wanted to tell you guys the story of Nyarlathotep from the Yog Sothoth, or the Lovecraft mythos. He was created by H.P. Lovecraft and first appeared in the poem bearing his own name in 1920. Lovecraft wrote the poem based on a dream he had. And it is believed by many, and I think I fall in this camp too, that Nikola Tesla could have been one of the figures that heavily inspired the creation of the character, while others speculate that each of the deities from the mythos represent a different kind of primal fear. For example, Cthulhu represents Lovecraft's fear of the deep sea and the unknown. Some believe that Nyarlathotep could likewise symbolize Lovecraft's fear of modernity, or perhaps his prejudice and racism towards people of color. It is no secret that Lovecraft was incredibly racist, and some of his descriptions of Nyarlathotep are a product of their time, we shall say. So I will not be repeating those. And it was then that Nyarlathotep came out of Egypt. Who he was, none could tell, but he was of the old native blood and looked like a pharaoh. The Fellahin knelt when they saw him, yet none could say why. He said he had risen up out of the blackness of 27 centuries, and that he had heard messages from places not on this planet. Into the lands of civilization came Nyarlathotep, swarthy, slender, and sinister, always buying strange instruments of glass and metal, and combining them into instruments yet stranger. He spoke much of the sciences, of electricity and psychology, and gave exhibitions of power which sent his spectators away speechless, yet which swelled his fame to exceeding magnitude. Men advised one another to see Nyarlathotep, and shuddered, and where Nyarlathotep went, rest vanished, for the small hours were rent with the screams of a nightmare. Nyarlathotep is an outer god, one of the most significant perhaps in the entire pantheon. He is known for having 999 avatars, and as such, he has just as many aliases. Some of the more well-known ones include the Crawling Chaos, the Face Eater, the Bloody Tongue, the God of 1,000 Forms, the God of the Desert, the Faceless God, the Father of all Bats, the Moon Presence, the Haunter of the Dark, the Stalker among the Stars, and the Masked Messenger. I'm not sure at what point this particular alias was given to him, but Mr. Tiddles has got to be my favorite alias for Nyarlathotep. It just suits him. I don't know, I can't explain why. As he is a frequent visitor to various planets throughout the cosmos, it is likely that he has more forms and names than we could possibly ever count. His parent is Azathoth. He has siblings with the Nameless Mist and the Darkness. His nephew is Yog Sothoth. His mate is Yonde, who is a creation of Clark Ashton Smith in 1934, and his children are the million-favored ones, Uganot and Lilith. Unlike many of his relatives, he is not exiled to the stars, and spends the majority of his time here on Earth, among humans. Also, unlike his relatives, he prefers to use human languages instead of alien languages, and most often takes the human form. He desires not death and destruction like his kin, but instead chaos and disorder. He is deliberately manipulative and deceptive, and takes pleasure in futzing around with the affairs of humanity by the use of propaganda. Nyarlathotep, when not causing mayhem, serves the many cults of the other outer gods and takes care of their affairs in their absence. He is the messenger of the outer gods and enacts their will. He is also a loyal servant of his father, Azathoth, and fulfills every fitful spastic wish that he may have. While Yog Sothoth's sphere may seem to be that of knowledge and wisdom, it would appear that Nyarlathotep's sphere would in turn be that of science and magic. Nyarlathotep was a kind of itinerant showman or lecturer who held forth in public halls and aroused widespread fear and discussion with his exhibitions. These exhibitions consisted of two parts. First, a horrible, possibly prophetic cinema reel, and later some extraordinary experiments with scientific and electrical apparatus. And that's it for how important Nyarlathotep is and how often he is mentioned in the mythos. Just like with every other deity, there's actually very little we know about him for sure. So, sorry this is so short. I hope you found it entertaining or interesting in some way. And today I'm going to tell you the story of Dagon from the Yog Sothoth or the Lovecraft mythos. Dagon is, aside from Yog Sothoth, obviously, one of my favorite Lovecraftian entities. Dagon appears in Mesopotamian mythology, specifically in Syria and the Hebrew Bible. Dagon is named as being the leading god of the Philistines as well. In the Hebrew Bible, the temple that Samson pulls down in Judges 16 is actually a temple to Dagon, who is thought to have been a deity responsible for fertility, agriculture, fishing, and water travel. In the Lovecraft mythos, Dagon first appears in a short story bearing the same name, written in 1917. He is the father of all Deep Ones, a race of amphibious humanoids that live in the depths of the Earth's oceans. He is worshipped by the esoteric Order of Dagon, a secret cult based in Innsmouth, Massachusetts, and is also worshipped by the Deep Ones themselves. Dagon is often known as Father Dagon, and his mate is often known as Mother Hydra. Hydra is the mother of all Deep Ones, blessed in similar ways to her consort in that she has a unnaturally long life and is gigantic in size. However, unlike Dagon, she is not classified as a Great Old One, though still considered a deity. Dagon, however, is classified as a Great Old One, which puts him on the same level as Cthulhu. Dagon is often described as being half fish and half human, like a giant Deep One, though sometimes he is described as just a giant fish-like creature. One theory states that Dagon is actually just abnormally old and large Deep One that was given immortality by the star spawn of Cthulhu, who sometimes choose formidable specimens from a given species to protect, nurture, and empower their species. At a very advanced age, Deep Ones can reach enormous size, well above 50 feet in height, and these such Deep Ones are often also worshipped by the cult of Dagon as deities, even though they are definitely just corporeal beings that are quite old. The short story Dagon tells the tale of a morphine-addicted man that recounts a horrifying experience he had during World War I while he was a merchant marine officer. His cargo ship had been captured by a German sea raider in one of the most open and least frequented parts of the broad Pacific Ocean. He escapes on a lifeboat and eventually finds himself stranded on a slimy expanse of hellish black mire putrid with the carcasses of decaying fish, which he speculates that landmass could have been a portion of the ocean floor that was perhaps thrown to the surface by volcanic upheaval. After walking for days, the character comes across an immeasurable canyon and a well-shaped monolith whose massive bulk had known the workmanship and perhaps the worship of living and thinking creatures. The monolith is covered in unfamiliar hieroglyphs and carvings consisting of aquatic themes and symbols. As the man looks on the monolith, a creature emerges from the water, with only a slight churning to mark its rise to the surface. The thing slid into view above the dark waters, vast, Polyphemus-like, and loathsome. It darted like a stupendous monster of nightmares to the monolith, about which it flung its gigantic scaly arms, the while it bowed its hideous head and gave vent to certain measured sounds. After seeing this, obviously quite spooked, the mariner flees back to his stranded boat, and vaguely recalls a great storm before waking up in a San Francisco hospital, where he had been taken after being rescued in mid-ocean by a US ship. And that's it! Today I wanted to talk about the Deep Ones. The race first appears in his short story Dagon, which was written in 1917 and published in 1919, but would not be named until The Shadow over Innsmouth, which was written in 1931 and published in 1936. The Deep Ones are definitely one of my favorite fantastical races. They are also known as fishfolk, kelpie, mermaids, sea demons, sea people, scaled ones, sirens, and those from below. The Deep Ones are humanoid beings with a combination of fish, human, and amphibian traits, often described as having gray or green tinted slippery skin, white stomachs, scaled ridged backs, webbed clawed hands, and gilled necks. They have heads similar to that of a fish, with mouths filled with sharp teeth and eyes incapable of blinking. They are said to move around by hopping or occasionally moving on all fours. They are described as having croaky voices and speaking a language that is not English. Deep Ones are a very diverse species, much like the fish in the sea, and come in a variety of subspecies, including one that is virtually blind and lives primarily in underwater caves. The town of Innsmouth has a pact with the Deep Ones. Dagon and the Deep Ones bless the town with abundant fish in exchange for interbreeding. Deep One hybrids, those that come about due to the mating of Deep Ones and humans, are always shown as having come from a female Deep One and a male human. The reason for this is similar to the reason that a liger is always born from a male lion and a female tigress. It is a safety measure based on both parties being those that possess the limiting growth gene of their own species. The offspring of these unions are usually born as normal humans, with the changes in their appearance occurring typically in the late teens. Physical changes are accompanied by a new awakening of senses, dreams of undersea cities, and a pull to the ocean. By the time they reach middle age, they will display some sort of deformity and will retire to the privacy of their homes until they are capable of fully living underwater. Apart from the physical changes, they will begin to feel a scorn for humanity, an affinity for non-Euclidean artwork of the Deep One race, and the powerful desire to abandon the human world and go to the Deep One city of Honpiel. Within a few years, they will undergo their final transformation into a full Deep One and leave their life on the land to begin a new life in the sea. The majority of Deep One hybrids inhabit remote coastal villages, and as the final transformation takes place, the hybrid either learns to accept their heritage or they go mad in the process. About 10% of hybrids will not complete the full transformation and will live the rest of their lives as half human, half Deep One, while another 10% won't show any signs of transformation at all, with the Deep One gene resurfacing in a future descendant. And that's pretty much it. And today I wanted to talk to you about the most mysterious of tomes, the Necronomicon. The book was created by H.P. Lovecraft, and it first appeared in 1924 in his short story The Hound, which was written in 1922. However, Lovecraft does quote the book's author a year earlier in The Nameless City. The book was written in Damascus in the early 8th century by a man called Abdul al-Hasred, or the Mad Poet, from Sana'a in Yemen. Its original title was Kitab al-Azif and was written in Arabic in Syria. He completed his work sometime before his mysterious death in 738 CE. It was first translated into Greek in 950 CE by a Theodorus Philetas of Constantinople. They were the ones to first give the book the title Necronomicon. A Latin translation was made in 1228 CE by an Olaus Wormius, and a German translation was made in 1848 CE by Frederick von Junst. An English translation was made at some point by a Dr. John Dee. The book is banned in most countries and is the archetypal book of forbidden knowledge, whose contents will threaten one's sanity. The contents of the entire book is of course not wholly known, but the known contents are numerous nonetheless. In Lovecraft's work, the following are mentioned: the Vorish sign, a formula for mind transference, instructions on how to make the powder of Ibn Ghazi, a passage about the crawling ones and the green flame, a long chant capable of summoning Yog Sothoth if used at the correct time, a large amount of information on the Antarctic elder things, stories about a ghoul, a line of asterisks that even Arabian original used to censor itself, passage in the Naqal, a chapter of Umir at-Tawil and the Ultimate Gate, information on the properties and symbology of the Hound amulet, and the couplet, "That is not dead which can eternal lie, and with strange eons even death may die." More contents that were added by Lovecraft's circle of friends and the expanded mythos include an incantation of Bokrug, an exorcism, a section that mentions creatures beyond the threshold of space, information on the Gulf of Cthulhu, a chapter on a complicated and lengthy process capable of resurrecting the dead, a formula for temporarily banishing manifestations of Vtuber, a ritual accelerating the transformation from human into deep one, the Mayo ceremony, copy of arcane symbols, the story of Kish and Sarnath, the Zoan chant, which is a spell for reflecting harmful powers sent against the caster, how to create a portal to Nyarlathotep, a footnote containing an untitled formula which is capable of opening a gateway to Bokrug, information on Nephren-Ka, information on an ancient aquatic race known as the Dweller in the Depths, an astrological chart, the Holy Din chant, a spell to send back Bubshosh to its own dimension, information about Yamuntha, a possible solution for telepathy, a description of the powers the other name of Azathoth gives the wielder, instructions on how to destroy an egg for Yig using a combination of musical notes, an illustration of the furnace of Nug, and a prophecy foretelling the rebirth of the High Priest Nofrka. Necronomicon has been adopted by countless franchises and movies, TV shows, comics, books, pretty much any form of creative media. It is pretty much synonymous with the Lovecraft mythos as a whole. And that's it. Today I wanted to talk about the Elder Things from the Lovecraft mythos. They're first mentioned in 1936 in H.P. Lovecraft's At the Mountains of Madness. 6 feet end to end, 3 5/10 feet central diameter, tapering to 1 foot at each end, like a barrel with 5 bulging ridges in place of staves. Lateral breakages, as of finished stalks, are at equator in the middle of these ridges. In furrows between ridges are curious growths, combs or wings that fold up and spread out like fans, which gives almost 7-foot wing spread. Arrangement reminds one of certain monsters of primal myth, especially fabled Elder Things in the Necronomicon. Also known as the Primordial Ones, the Elder Things are alien creatures who resemble neither members of the animal or plant kingdom, their shape being described as a cylinder with a starfish-like head, tentacled feet, and retractable wings. Elder Things prefer aquatic environments, but they can function just as well on land or in the air. The Elder Things came to Earth when the planet was still young, over 1 billion years ago, and established a city on the South Pole. From there, they migrated out all across the Earth to settle in different areas. They were the first race to come to Earth, and are credited for having created Ubosatla, the source of all biological life on Earth, a servitor race, the Shoggoths, and ultimately humans. Whether this is intentional or not is unknown, as the Elder Things are first and foremost scientists, and it is believed that terrestrial life on Earth was created by accident during arcane experimentation. The Elder Things have a very advanced culture, valuing art and architecture, having their own writing system, coinage, and above all, valuing science and research. Though they had no religion, they did fear an unknown entity that lurked beyond their capital city. They also appear to revere the DNA helix as the source of all life. The Elder Things fought wars with the Starspawn of Cthulhu, the Migo, and the Great Race of Yith, and also put down an insurrection of their Shoggoth servants. Though they were always victorious, the amount of conflict that the Elder Things experienced took its toll, and many of their settlements and cities were abandoned over time. Though they retreated to their home at the South Pole, their culture remained strong, with their art and sciences continuing to flourish. As the Earth cooled and their Antarctic home became more and more inhospitable, they decided to retreat further from the outside world into the vast underground world beneath their city. For most, the story ends there. But if the reports out of Miskatonic University are to be believed, 2 members of an Antarctic expedition discovered the ruins of their city in 1941. It is also believed that several groups of Elder Things still reside in the deepest parts of Earth's oceans today. That's all for now. Today, I wanted to talk about the star spawn of Cthulhu, or the Cthulhu, or the Zothians, from the Lovecraft mythos. The star spawn first appeared in H.P. Lovecraft's At the Mountains of Madness in 1936. Their appearance has great similarity to Cthulhu, though obviously significantly smaller in size. They are described as being composed of matter that is wholly different from anything native to our universe, and are malleable to a certain degree, and can undergo transformations similar to a shapeshifter. And they are said to have come from an unknown region of space. The star spawn are known for serving and worshipping Cthulhu as their leader. When they arrived on Earth and found the Elder Things things already here, two races waged war upon each other. It is unknown how long this time of war lasted for, but eventually peace was finally established, with the Starspawn laying claim to any exposed land, while the Elder Things laid claim to the oceans. The Starspawn would build great cities on their lands, and peace between the Elder Things and the Starspawn would continue until a great cataclysm caused all of the land the Starspawn cities had built to sink into the seas. It is presumed that this is a natural occurrence. However, some theorize that the Elder Gods could have been responsible. The great city of Earlier sank during this time, and many Starspawn either perished in the sinking or went into a deep, death-like hibernation. It is unclear whether Cthulhu also went into his deep slumber during this time, or if he arrived in Earlier at a later date and joined the Starspawn then, or if he was already sleeping when the event occurred. It is stated in Call of Cthulhu that the Great Old Ones could not live while the stars were wrong, so another theory is that when certain heavenly bodies are aligned, the Starspawn and Cthulhu will awaken again, and Earlier will rise from the depths of the ocean. From the point of the sinking of their cities, the Starspawn would fade into obscurity, and would never again be a major power on Earth. And that's it! And today I wanted to talk about the Great Race of Yith from the Lovecraft mythos. The Great Race of Yith, or the Yithians, first appear in H.P. Lovecraft's A Shadow Out of Time, which was written in 1934 and published in 1936. From what we know, they come from the planet Yith, though what their physical appearance was like during this time, we do not know. It is believed that they actually have no real physical form, since they can take up residence in whatever body they desire. The Great Race's members were immense rugose cones, 10 feet high, and with head and other organs attached to foot-thick, distensible limbs spreading from the apexes. They spoke by the clicking and scraping of huge paws or claws attached to the end of two of their four limbs, and walked by the expansion and contraction of a viscous layer attached to their vast 10-foot bases. Technically, the Yithians are not native to the planet of Yith. However, they seem to have destroyed all records and archives of their history prior to migrating there. They began migrating to Earth and mind-swapping and inhabiting an indigenous cone-shaped species around 200 million years ago. The reason for this mass exodus is thought to be related to a wormhole experiment gone horribly wrong, or an attack on Yith by the Flying Polyps from the second world of their solar system, which then forced the Yithians to flee. Knowing what we know about the Yithians and their insatiable curiosity and habitual hoarding of knowledge, I would think that the former is probably more likely the case than the latter. Yithians communicate using their pincers to produce a series of clicking and scraping sounds, though it is also believed that they could use telepathy to convey concepts and emotions. They also had a system of writing and would write using the tentacles protruding from their heads. They ate and drank using the red trumpet-like organ and are described as only sharing two senses with humanity, sound and sight. Yithians are sexless and genderless and reproduced via seeds laid in water. However, this was a very rare event due to their extremely long lifespan, which could last up to several thousands of years. Upon arriving on Earth and brain-swapping with the cone-shaped creatures, the Yithians were forced to fend off attacks by the Flying Polyps, which were the natural predators of the conical critters. With their mastery of technology, the Yithians emerged victorious and imprisoned the polyps beneath the ground. They also waged war against the Elder Things, but very little is written about that conflict, and the polyps would become their primary enemy, to the point to where any architecture left behind by the polyps was completely abandoned by the Yithians, and even mentioning the polyps was considered super taboo. After their victory, the Yithians went about building their vast cities with skyscrapers thousands of feet in height, nuclear-powered vehicles and flying machines, and engaging in historical research on all the species of Earth. It built a great city called Pnakotis, which was located in Australia's Great Sandy Desert. The city held the Pnakotis manuscripts, which contain the entire history of the Great Race of Yith. They were incredibly skilled historians due to their time-traveling abilities. Their mental time travel powers consisted of them projecting their minds backward in time, similar to a form of astral projection. As a historian myself, I am very jealous of the Yithians. Could you imagine just popping back in time to learn stuff from the source, with no worry of the butterfly effect? They use a different time-traveling technique to journey into the future. The Yithian would send their mind into the future and select a body from that time period to inhabit, usually a scholarly type, and would swap minds with them, sending the mind of that individual back in time into the Yithian's previous body. This exchange would usually last about 5 years, during which time the Yithian would learn everything it could about the culture and time period of its new body, while the host's mind resided in the Yithian's previous body and would be interrogated and asked to chronicle everything they could about the culture and time from whence they came. If that host mind was cooperative, they were treated with kindness and respect and even allowed to go on excursions outside of the cities, consult the libraries of the Great Race, and speak with other visitors from different worlds and times. After the Yithian was done with their research, they would construct a device that would send its mind back to its original body, while the host mind would be hypnotized to forget the experience and would be sent back to its original time and body. Great Race also formed a cult called the Motion, which is a group that helped the Great Race visitors with assimilating into the new period and silencing any formerly possessed minds who maybe remember too much of their time during captivity, as the hypnosis was flawed and occasionally some of the host minds would retain memories of the Great Race. This wasn't a big deal, however, and was seen more of an annoyance by the Yithians. While death was extremely uncommon among the Yithians, when such an event did occur, they were interred ceremonially by their fellow Yithians. If a Yithian could not return to its original body before death, the minds of the Yithian and the alien host would remain swapped, and the swapped mind within the Yithian's body would be treated with kindness and almost as an equal. One can assume that they were adopted into the Yithian society to a degree. Around 50 million years ago, the Flying Polyps that were imprisoned by the Great Race would rise up and overthrow their captors. However, the Yithians had foreseen this doom and would send the minds of their brightest scientists off into the distant future to ensure the survival of their race. These survivors would spend time on Jupiter, a dark star near Taurus, and eventually would travel back to Earth again and inhabit the bodies of a Coleopteros or beetle-like hive mind species 50 million years into the future. And that's it! Today I wanted to talk about the Shoggoths from the Lovecraft mythos. They first appear in H.P. Lovecraft's At the Mountains of Madness in 1936, but would also appear later in The Shadow over Innsmouth, which was also published in 1936, and The Thing on the Doorstep, published a year later in 1937. Formless protoplasm, able to mock and reflect all forms and organs and processes. Viscous agglutinations of bubbling cells, rubbery 15-foot spheroids infinitely plastic and ductile. Slaves of suggestion, builders of cities, more and more sullen, more and more intelligent, more and more amphibious, more and more imitative. Great God, what madness made even those blasphemous old ones willing to use and carve such things. The Shoggoths were genetically engineered by the Elder Things as a race of servitors who used them as workers in their underwater construction projects. They are described as sentient blobs of self-shaping gelatinous flesh, similar to perhaps an amoeba. They are around 15 feet in diameter, should they choose to take the shape of a sphere, but they can vary wildly in size. They are capable of forming themselves into whatever shapes they find necessary in the moment, and can manifest whatever organs they deem necessary at the time as well. However, they tend to always sport eyes, mouths, and pseudopodia. They can move incredibly fast, being compared to a train. The Shoggoth can envelop prey and generate enough suction to decapitate their victim. This is specifically the style of combat they used against the Elder Things during their many uprisings against the slave masters. Originally, they were created to be mindless and with no real will of their own, but over the eons they slowly evolved to develop consciousness, and as a result would periodically rebel against the Elder Things. One of the more strange behaviors of the Shoggoths is their repetitive cry of "Tekeli," which was apparently a phrase they picked up from the Elder Things. Interestingly, Lovecraft's work would not be the first time this phrase would pop up, as Lovecraft was heavily inspired by Edgar Allan Poe, who uses the phrase in his 1838 novel The Narrative of Arthur Gordon Pym of Nantucket, where a flock of birds in Antarctica cry the same phrase, which is thought to be an exclamation of suffering and woe. Eventually, after millions of years of servitude, the Shoggoths would finally claim victory in one of their uprisings against the Elder Things, around 150 million years ago in the Permian period, and they would go on to build their own cities. Their architecture would mimic the five-pointed symmetry found in the buildings of the Elder Things. Some Shoggoths have managed to survive into the modern age in the deepest parts of the oceans and in Antarctica. The Shoggoths in the oceans are often referred to as sea Shoggoths by the underwater amphibious race called the Deep Ones. The Deep Ones and sea Shoggoths are known to be allies, and the sea Shoggoths even helped to protect Urlier and the resting place of Cthulhu. The race known as the Migo tried to conduct their own experiments on the Shoggoths, performing mind grafts to try and make them more controllable and combining them with their own genetic material. These Shoggoths would come to be known as ghouls, but they proved to be just as rebellious as their ancestors, and the Migo would eventually be forced to confine them to secret caverns. In the distant past, Shoggoths were thought to have been used by certain cults, kept in underground pits and used for rituals and disposing of sacrifices or enemies. In more recent times, a new breed known as the Shoggoth Lords Shoggoths have come to prominence. They're smaller and more intelligent than their fellow Shoggoths, and are known for having enough control over their gelatinous forms to imitate humans, and it is said that some have already infiltrated various human cultures. Another Shoggoth variant, related to the Lords, is said to be able to perfectly replicate a specific human if the Shoggoth should receive a pint of blood from said human once a month for a year. And that's it! Today I wanted to talk about the Great Old Ones Nug and Yeb from the Lovecraft mythos. There is very little known about Nug and Yeb, so this video will be pretty short, and I apologize for that. Their first appearance is in H.P. Lovecraft and Adolphe de Castro's short story The Last Test, which was published in November 1928. Nug and Yeb are the children of Shub the Allmother and Yog Sothoth. They are twin entities spawned on the doomed nebula of Slycaria, and are also known as the Twin Blasphemies. Nug is the father of Cthulhu, and Yeb is the mother of Tsathoggua. Nug is also suspected to be the father of Hastur, possibly, but then it is also suspected that Hastur is their father? So take that with a grain of salt. Both of them reproduced via asexual fission, an ability inherited from their mother, as is their physical appearance. The twins are worshipped in Ky'n-yan, Mu, and Irim, and represent a kind of duality, sort of like yin and yang. Nug is considered the father of ghouls, while Yeb is alleged to be a leader and guide of the Azathoth cult. These two great ones are the creators and keepers of the garden where Yig resides, and are also entrusted with the task of clearing the earth for the Great One's return, using the devices known as the Furnace of Yeb and the Torch of Nug to accomplish this task. This is a family affair, since Yog Sothoth is the gateway, and Shub and Cthulhu are to one day control the Earth. However, Nug and Yeb are instrumental in making the Earth ready and conducive for the Great Old Ones when they arrive. For this reason, they are often thought of as engineers. Lovecraft apparently described Nug and Yeb as being a bit destructive at times, and having the ability to dissolve matter. How they accomplish this exactly is unclear. And that's pretty much it. I'm sorry that this was so short, but the facts we actually know about Nug and Yeb are so sparse. I attribute a lot of this the same way I kind of logic my way out of our limited knowledge of all the other Great Old Ones that the mortal mind simply cannot comprehend. And today I'm going to talk to you about the Ky'n-yanians from the Lovecraft mythos. They appear in H.P. Lovecraft's The Mound, written in the winter of 1929 and 1930. The Ky'n-yanians are alternately known as the Old Ones or the people of Ky'n-yan. Their origin is unknown, but they came to Earth as colonists. They built many cities, including one on one of the mountains of Kadath. After the sinking of Atlantis, they moved to the underground city of Ky'n-yan, located in the center of North America. As a species, they are intelligent beings who have appearances similar to humans and an aristocratical hierarchy. Due to their isolation, they have actually lost part of their culture, including their knowledge of magic. However, they are still great dreamers and possess great mental power. They have the ability to will themselves into becoming intangible, and thus can walk through walls. They are immortal, only dying by violence or suicide. Their religion centers around Yig and Cthulhu, whom they call Cthulhu. According to them, Cthulhu taught them to write in the early glyph language, and brought an alien metal with him to Earth, which they have now come to use as a currency. This metal is the only known substance that can harm or ward off the Ky'n-yanians while they are in their intangible form. They learned of the formless spawn of Tsathoggua and the gods Azathoth, Nyarlathotep, Ghatanothoa, Nug Yeb, and Shub from their exploration of the abyss of Kai. They also have a strong interest in the culture of the Serpent people, often descending to the Yoth region to study the archaeological remains that were left there. Overall, they're very bored as a race. I guess living forever will do that to you. Having lost interest in most things, including taking care of themselves, which has resulted in them indulging in grotesque entertainments and the worship of the most sinister of gods. The Ky'n-yanians have a servitor race of zombie slaves that do not have rights, and also used machines that did their work for them. They are very technologically advanced and have knowledge of the sciences and have mastered the use of atomic power. Their slaves, known as the Mb, are kept alive thanks to the Ky'n-yanians' advanced sciences, and serve as amusement for the Ky'n-yans in public games that involves torture, and being used as food for the Ky'n-yans' mounts, the Gyayothan hybrids. The Mb are believed to have all once been sentient creatures, some former Ky'n-yanians themselves. In the Mound, a Spanish explorer was initially welcomed into Ky'n-yan, and even married one of their own, named Tlayo. However, when he and his new wife decided to try and leave for the surface, which is strictly forbidden, once you enter the city you can never leave, so as to protect its location and the isolation of its people. They were captured and branded as traitors. For their punishment, they were turned into Mb. And that's pretty much it. The Ky'n-yanians are definitely an interesting people. Part of me wonders if Lovecraft was a bit inspired by stories of ancient Rome when it came to the whole overindulgence and violent public games. It seems a little familiar, but that's just a speculation on my part. Anyway, and today I wanted to talk about the Flying Polyps from the Lovecraft mythos. They first appear in Lovecraft's short story, The Shadow Out of Time, published in 1936. The basis of the fear was a horrible elder race of half-polypus, utterly alien entities which had come through space from immeasurably distant universes, and had dominated the Earth and 3 other solar planets about 600 million years ago. The flying polyps are also known as the Aphroplasm, the bubbling ones, flesh twisters, floating horrors, and they who leave the mark. Flying polyps traveled across space and arrived on Earth around 750 million years ago. They constructed towering basalt cities and began warring with the great race of Yith. It is believed that the polyps also raised cities on Mars, Neptune, and Venus. Eventually, the Yithians would defeat and drive the flying polyps underground, up until about 70 million years ago during the Cretaceous period, when the polyps rose up to exact revenge by exterminating the Yithians in one fell swoop. Between then and modern times, the flying polyps have left the planet en masse. A very few number of them have stayed behind, opting to return to the dark places of the world, such as the depths of the oceans and caves. There are very little actual records about the flying polyps, as even the extensive archives of the Yithians are evasive on the subject, often making vague references to them, but giving no real description of the polyps. They are, as their name entails, capable of flight, even though they apparently have no physical appendage to facilitate this. They were apparently also capable of controlling air and wind for both manipulative and offensive purposes. They are also known for leaving 5-toed radial footprints when walking on the ground. And that is sadly really all we know about the flying polyps. Like I said, the ones who kept the most records on them would be the Yithians, but because they were the Yithians' enemy and committed atrocities, the Yithians tended to only mention them in fear, and didn't really give any details, sadly. Anyway, today I want to talk about the Mi-Go from the Lovecraft mythos. They're first introduced in H.P. Lovecraft's short story, The Whisperer in Darkness, in 1931. They were pinkish things about 5 feet long, with crustaceous bodies bearing vast pairs of dorsal fins and membranous wings, and several sets of articulated limbs, and with a sort of convoluted ellipsoid covered with multitudes of very short antennae, where a head would ordinarily be. The Mi-Go are alternatively known as the fungi from Yuggoth, the outer ones, the outer beings, the winged ones, the nevermen, the ones from the sky, the Yogothians, and the abominable snowmen. No idea about that last one. They are an extragalactic species that have colonized numerous worlds, including Yuggoth. They are not actually indigenous to that planet. Several types of Mi-Go exist, including winged and wingless variations. Wings do not function on Earth and are used to fly through the ether of outer space. Ether was a pre-Einsteinian concept. Several other space-going species from the Lovecraft mythos have similar wings, suggesting that they are a standard mode of interplanetary travel for alien races. The Mi-Go first established bases on Earth during the Jurassic period, about 100 million years ago, with the purpose of mining rare ore and minerals, and later to research humans. They warred with the Elder Things, and eventually settled in the Northern Hemisphere, and have remained there to this day. They are unable to consume anything from Earth, so they cultivate their own fungi as a source of nourishment. Much like the star spawn of Cthulhu, the Mi-Go are fundamentally alien in comparison to all life on Earth, their bodies consisting of a form of matter that does not occur naturally here. Due to their alien composition, they do not appear in photography, since the matter that they are made of seems to reflect life differently. When they die, their bodies dissolve within a few hours. They are described as being most like fungi, however their appearance is most like that of a crustacean or an insect. And they also have something akin to chlorophyll. Their blood has been described as a fetid green ichor or green sticky stuff. They tend to communicate by changing the color of their heads. However, sometimes they are actually able to speak human languages. If not naturally, they can modify their bodies to make them able to speak. There's a buzzy undertone sound when they speak, and their voices have been described as quite frightening. They are also capable of telepathy. They're accustomed to the darkness of space, and so they prefer to avoid sunlight. They're most active at night, especially when it is a new moon. This aversion to light is, however, not related to their eyesight, since they're blind, and perceive the world around them with other senses. So we're not really sure why exactly they avoid light. The Mi-Go are a technologically advanced race, especially in medical and surgical technology. Body modification and brain extraction are a piece of cake to them. Some of their creations include the Shining Trapezohedron, the brain cylinders, the bioweb armor, the earthquake mining machine, the electric gun, the mist projector, several magical teleportation gates connecting their outposts, biological automatons, and Ghatanothoa. They worship Nyarlathotep, Shub, Groth, and Yog Sothoth. Their sense of morality is entirely alien to us, and so humans perceive them as being highly malicious. And that's pretty much it. I'm a lore keeper in one of Yog Sothoth's libraries, and today I wanted to talk about the great old one Ghatanothoa. We first see it appear in H.P. Lovecraft's 1935 story Out of the Eons. Few of its names include the Dark God, the Devil God, the Demon God, the Thing on the Mount, Tanta, Tanota, Tan, and Katanta. Oozing and surging up out of that yawning trapdoor in the Cyclopean crypt, I had glimpsed such an unbelievable behemothhic monstrosity that I could not doubt the power of its original to kill with its mere sight. Even now, I cannot begin to suggest it with any words of my command. I might call it gigantic, tentacled, proboscidean, octopus-eyed, semi-amorphous, plastic, partly squamous, and partly rugose. Ugh. But nothing I could say could even adumbrate the loathsome, unholy, non-human, extragalactic horror and hatefulness and unmutterable evil of that forbidden spawn of black chaos and illimitable night. As I write these words, the associated mental image caused me to lean back, faint, and nauseated. Ghatanothoa is the offspring of Cthulhu and Yith, and is siblings with Ithogtha, Zothamog, and Cthulhu. Children of Cthulhu and Yith are said to have been born near the star Zoth. It is one of the Great Old Ones, and it is said to be indescribable, appearing as a combination of octopus, elephant, scaly and wrinkled and amorphous. Ghatanothoa was brought to Earth from the planet of Yoggoth. It's suspected by the Migo, who built a colossal fortress atop the mountain of Yadithgo in Kana on the lost continent of Mu, and sealed Ghatanothoa beneath the fortress on the mountain. The Migo, and later the humans of Mu, were said to worship the monster and offer it sacrifices for fear of its horrible power. The sight of Ghatanothoa alone was especially feared, as it is said that anyone who looked upon it would become petrified and encased in leathery skin for all eternity. However, Mu would sink beneath the Pacific Ocean, trapping Ghatanothoa in the process. Traces of Ghatanothoa's cults could be found across the globe even after Mu's sinking. One story prior to Mu's sinking tells the story of Tyag, the high priest of the cult of Shub, who opposed Ghatanothoa vehemently. It is said that he created a magical scroll that could protect the holder from the effects of seeing Ghatanothoa, and he resolved to climb the mountain to the god's home to confront the horror and potentially kill it. Bold, that's all I have to say about that. Ghatanothoa's priests, obviously, took offense to this, and so they secretly did the old switcheroo with his magical scroll, giving him a worthless one. Tyag never returned from his trip up Yadithgo, and his fate remains a mystery, but I think we can deduce what became of him. 10,000 years later, the Ghatanothoa high priests had gained so much power that they demanded the closure of all other gods' temples on Mu. Xanthu, a high priest of Ithogtha, obviously took offense to this and attempted to summon his god in response. By doing this, he unwittingly, or perhaps wittingly, who knows, caused the sinking of the continent of Mu, and thus the imprisonment of Ghatanothoa beneath it. And that's about it. And today I wanted to talk about the great old one Yig. He first appears in H.P. Lovecraft's The Curse of Yig, written in 1929. Yig is also known as the father of serpents, an odd half-anthropomorphic devil of highly arbitrary and capricious nature. He was not wholly evil, and was usually quite well disposed towards those who gave proper respect to him and his children, the serpents. But in the autumn, he became abnormally ravenous and had to be driven away by means of suitable rites. Yig is a great old one that takes the shape of a great serpent man, or on occasion a great Eastern-style dragon. Yig is said to be the offspring of the great dragon Maponovruchin, who dwells beneath the now-lost continent of Mu. It is said that Yig originally came to the Earth eons ago from the world Zandanua, where apparently his brother Rokon still lives. It is believed that when Yig arrived on Earth, he then created all the reptiles and the insects. Some believe him to also be the creator of humanity. Yig now resides in the Pit of Nugoth in the caverns of Yoth, beneath the underground sea of Ky'n-yan. It is thought that the worship of Yig spread throughout Yoth to Ky'n-yan and from there to humanity. in the Americas, Mu, and Valusia. Unlike most Great Ones, Yig is benevolent towards humans. The only time his worshippers fear him is in the autumn around the harvest, and so they placate him with a festival and music and offerings of food. But even then, he will only really visit his wrath onto those that harm serpents or snakes, all of which are considered his children. Should someone be silly enough to anger him, his wrath can consist of madness, mutated offspring, and visitations of white snakes with crescent moons on their foreheads. One could also be, themselves, turned into a snake as punishment. Yig and Nyarlathotep are said to be rivals, according to the Necronomicon, and Yig may also have a connection to the twin gods Nug and Yeb, who are credited with creating the conditions in which he can survive in the pit of Nug. Yig is known, especially in the Lovecraft mythos, as a god that the indigenous people of North America, specifically the Plains natives, have always worshipped and apparently still to this day worship. As a Native American IRL, I would like to take a moment to remind all of my lovely viewers that this is entirely fiction. All of this is fiction. These are all things made up in the minds of several gentlemen in the early 1930s. It's a fictional world. Many tribes do, including my own, have snake gods or serpent gods, but Yig is not one of them because he is fictional. Anyway, that's about it. Yig is quite mysteriously, but definitely one of my favorite Great Old Ones, perhaps because he's able to be reasoned with and is generally benevolent, and it's always a good thing. I'm excited to do a video about his followers, the Serpent people, so stay tuned for that. And today, I wanted to talk about the Serpent people. They first appear in H.P. Lovecraft's 1921 story, The Nameless City, and they were also featured in Robert E. Howard's 1929 work, The Shadow Kingdom, and Clark Ashton Smith's Hyperborea series. They are also known as Snake Men, Serpent Folk, and Valusians. They are a bipedal reptile race described as having humanoid bodies with snake tails and heads and scaly skin. They once ruled the earth before humanity came along, conquering the great empire of Valusia. Some say that they have their origin on Venus, while some believe that they are actually indigenous to Earth. In Mesozoic times, they first lived on Shugon, an ancient continent that was destroyed in a cataclysm around 65 million BCE. This caused them to migrate to Elder Valusia, also known as the Thurian continent. Then after that, small pockets all across the globe. One of these places is the underground caverns of Yoth in North America. It was also around this time that it is estimated they conquered the empire of Valusia, building great stone cities full of laboratories and temples to Yig, Shub, Tsathoggua, Han, and Byatis. They declined during the Triassic Age due to climate conditions. They would resurge again in the Pleistocene era. However, they were constantly at war with humanity. While they had an advanced culture of science and sorcery, and even the goat spawn and Shoggoths once served them, they were ultimately wiped out by the humans. One of their notable skills is being able to impersonate any humanoid life form at will, a skill that they use to infiltrate human society and gain power. It is believed that some may have survived by retreating deep into the bowels of the earth in Yoth at one point, and also in the hills of Wales. They were attributed with the creation of many magical items such as the Cobra Crown and the Serpent Ring of Set. Today, the Serpent people are so few in number and have either magically hibernated to escape their doom, or have assimilated or infiltrated human society in order to survive. Though their knowledge of poisons, magic, and science make them formidable foes, it is believed that they are no longer a threat overall just due to the lack of their numbers. There's so few left. I think they're pretty cool. I first encountered the Serpent people of Valusia playing the game Conan Exiles, and I just love them so much. That's about it. Today, I wanted to talk about the Great Old One, Gloon. Gloon first appears in H.P. Lovecraft's short story The Temple, written in 1920 and published in 1925. Now, some classify Gloon as a Great Old One, and some classify Gloon as a lesser outer god. Personally, I would put him in the same category as like Cthulhu or Dagon, so as a Great Old One. Gloon has alternatively been known as the Master of the Temple, the Corrupter of Flesh, and Gloon. He is described as a beautiful marble Greco-Roman styled statue depicting a handsome young man wearing a laurel wreath. However, this appearance is a facade, and Gloon's true form is more akin to a giant limacine, the word of the day. It's Latin in origin and means resembling or relating to a slug. Admittedly, we know a lot less about Gloon than I would like, but I feel feel like that's a pretty common theme in all of my videos at this point. Gloon was imprisoned long ago within a huge basalt temple on the continent of Atlantis, and when it sank, he obviously sank with it, and is still trapped there to this day, somewhere under the Atlantic Ocean, according to the story. Gloon can only interact with the outside world via the use of ancient Atlantean statues that are carved in his image. This ability is something that the children of Cthulhu also possess, like Ithogtha and Zothamog, etc. If someone comes into contact with one such artifact, it is said that they will begin to have vivid dreams of the sunken city in the temple that Gloon resides in. Dreams will become more frequent and realistic, the glowing light within the temple slowly driving the dreamer to insanity, even supposedly causing them to wake up drenched in seawater and even seaweed after dreaming. The end goal is to drive the person to choose to end their own life, so that the soul can be slurped up by the Temple of Gloon, where the Great Old One will slowly torture the soul until all of their life force has completely disappeared. Why he does this, I have no idea. If Gloon consumed the souls, that would make more sense, I guess. Maybe he gets his power or energy from the madness or pain he causes to the soul, and that's why he tortures them. Or maybe it's just fun for him. I have no clue. Gloon appears in the expanded Cthulhu mythos throughout the decades, and a lot of them seem to imply that Gloon represents some kind of homoerotic fascination due to nearly everyone who sees Gloon's masculine statuesque appearance finds it very beautiful. He appears in a 2011 novelette called The Infernal History of the Ivy Bridge Twins by Molly Tansier, where he is described as Dionysian to the point where Gloon is even served by dolphins. During the events of Lovecraft's story, The Temple, we literally see this happen to the submarine crew of the U-29 from June 1917 to August 1917 in the North Atlantic. It's my favorite story by Lovecraft, despite it being so short. I highly recommend reading it. I'll leave a link in the description. You can actually read a lot of Lovecraft's work for free at the HP Lovecraft Archive. I do also own a physical copy of all of his collected works, but if you don't, then the archive is a great free online option for reading Lovecraft. Anyway, thank you so much for hanging out with me, and today I wanted to talk about the Great Old One Bokrug. Bokrug first appears in the short story The Doom That Came to Sarnath, written in 1919 by H.P. Lovecraft and published in 1920. He is also known as the Great Water Lizard and is described as, you guessed it, a giant lizard. Bokrug is believed to be relatively benevolent. Much like Yig, his wrath is indeed terrible should you incur it, though it may take 1,000 years for his victims to feel that wrath. Bokrug resides in a lake called Thun that borders the settlement of Ib and the city of Sarnath in the land of Nar. Not much is known about Nar aside from it having a river named Ai that runs through it, and that there are settlements called Thra, Ilarnek, Pedathiron, Sarnath, and Ib that were built along its banks. Some believe it's located in the Dreamlands, while others believed it was once located in modern-day Saudi Arabia. To understand Bokrug, I need to elaborate on the inhabitants of Nar at the time of the events of the story The Doom of Sarnath. The city of Sarnath was a human settlement, while the land of Ib is the home of the Thumha, also called the Ibians or the Beings of Ib. The ancient stone city of Ib, built on the banks of Bokrug's Lake Thun, was thought to be as old as the lake itself. The Thumha are an amphibian-like species that share a lot of similarities with the deep ones, though they seem to be a lot more docile and peaceful and more frog-like rather than fish-like. They worshipped Bokrug and carved statues and idols of him. In some versions of their mythology, they are from the moon. The humans of Sarnath are actually the ones who gave the residents of Ib their name Thumha, which means voiceless ones, allegedly, because they don't speak. It would also be the humans of Sarnath who caused Bokrug to wake from his peaceful slumber. The humans found the existence of the Ibians to be offensive because they were hideous in appearance. And so they massacred the Thumha people, stole their deity idol, and destroyed the city around 7000 BC. Frickin' humans! Why all the genocide humans? Why? Anyway, Sarnath was known for its beauty, and for 1,000 years after their horrible crime against nature, it continued to grow. It is described as having palaces, gardens, vast temples, towering spires, and paved streets. Some say that the humans of Sarnath built their city on the ruins of Ib, while others say that the two cities existed at the same time on different banks of the lake. at least up until the humans of Sarnath wiped out the Thumha of Ib. However, their murderous sin would come back to bite them, because it took Bokrug 1,000 years to wake up and exact his revenge. On the 1,000-year anniversary of the destruction of the stone city of Ib, the lake rose, and Bokrug slowly transformed the humans of Sarnath into the likeness of those they hated, the Thumha. A day later, nothing would remain of that great city and its residents. The land it was built on reduced to a muddy plain. It was never resettled, except perhaps by water lizards. The ruins of Ib, however, would slowly become recolonized by the Thumha. This is what takes place during the events of Lovecraft's short story, which I will provide a link for in the description of where you can read it yourself. In the expanded mythos, writer Brian Lumley includes Bokrug in The Sister City, written in 1967, and Beneath the Moors, but has reimagined him into an entire race rather than a single deity. According to Lumley, the Bokrug are very similar to Deep Ones and have set themselves up as the ruling race over the Thumha. They originally colonized parts of Earth in ancient times. They are described as having a life cycle where they send their children up to the surface to be raised by humans, but that around puberty the Bokrug would start mutating and developing their amphibious characteristics before returning to the sea, exactly like the Deep Ones. Except in this rendition they're more lizard-like than frog-like or fish-like. And that's about it. And today I wanted to talk about the Great Old One, Rhan-Tegoth. He first appears in H.P. Lovecraft's story The Horror in the Museum, written in 1932 and published in 1933. He is alternatively known as the Terror of the Hominids and He of the Ivory Throne. Rhan-Tegoth, infinite and invincible, I am your slave and high priest. You are hungry, and I provide. I read the sign, and have led you forth. I shall feed you with blood, and you shall feed me with power. Rhan-Tegoth is described as being 15 feet in height, which is rather small for a Great Old One in my opinion, and insect-like, with an elephant-like trunk and 6 limbs with claw-like pincers. He originally called the planet of Yuggoth home, which may explain why he looks so similar to the Migo. Rhan's family tree is one big shrub, and he is known for being weak in comparison to most other Great Ones, an unfortunate thing to be known for. He made the trip to Earth about 3 million years ago, and made his new home in the Arctic. This would have been during the Pliocene epoch, so from about 5 to 2.5 million years ago. In the Arctic, it is thought that he was worshipped by the pre-human Nopkes. At some point during this time, he migrated to Alaska and was worshipped allegedly by the inhabitants there, and their sacrifices made him stronger. But he would eventually sink into obscurity and be forgotten by his worshippers. He would, like all the other Great Old Ones, go into hibernation. He is thought to be the last Great Old One to sleep, and is alleged to be the first to awaken. Some believe that if Rhan is destroyed, the other Great Old Ones will also never wake up. However, I'm honestly not sure how they would accomplish that. I think I have yet to read of a Great Old One actually being defeated by humans. In 1926, a museum curator named George Rogers would head an expedition up the Noatak River to find the ancient city that Rhan-Tegoth lived in. They did find it, and George, seeing the Great Old One dreaming on his ivory throne, just freaking took him. George yoinked Rhan right out of there and lugged his Eldritch ass back to London, where he was supposed to be displayed in Rogers' Wax Museum. Oh, Rogers was British, that explains it. However, Rogers would disappear shortly after that expedition, and Rhan-Tegoth was sold off to the Royal Ontario Museum as an Alouette carving, which are the indigenous people that originate around the Aleutian Islands and western Alaska. Poor Rhan was declared a fake, however, and was chucked into storage, where he then disappeared. Rumor has it that Rhan-Tegoth resurfaced in the UK, and then New York, during the 1980s, but those are just rumors. Who knows where old Rhan is these days, but I hope he's having pleasant dreams. And that is it! And today I wanted to talk about the Nameless Mist and the Unnamed Darkness. They appear in a few of Lovecraft's Select, but also in the Whisper in Darkness written in 1930. The Nameless Mist is also known as the Magnum Innominandum, the Milk of the Void, and Yog Sothoth. Mist is one of the children of Azathoth, along with the Darkness and Nyarlathotep. The manner in which it reproduced is unknown, but the Nameless Mist did indeed produce an offspring, Yog Sothoth. Nug and Yeb are Mist's grandchildren, and Cthulhu and Tsathoggua are its great-grandchildren. The Nameless Mist is classified as an outer god or outer being, and is older than literally everything in existence, with the exception of Azathoth and its siblings. Unfortunately, per usual, very little is known about the Nameless Mist, but it is speculated to have abilities akin to its family members. It is said to be omnipotent, immortal, incorporeal, and has the ability to manipulate space, time, and reality. You know, the usual stuff. However, despite its power, it's rarely mentioned in the mythos. It is thought that Mist and Darkness, like their parent Azathoth, exist at the center of the universe and reside in Azathoth's court, separated and completely unbothered by our reality. This could very well be why we know so little about them, unlike their sibling Nyarlathotep, who is famous for his meddling in our reality. They just simply can't be bothered with insignificant mortals. The Unnamed Darkness, like its sibling, is an outer god. The Unnamed Darkness has alternatively been called Magnum Tenebrosum and Lord Darkness. It is a parallel to its sibling, the Nameless Mist. Darkness would produce the offspring known as Shub, who would go on to mate with Yog and produce Nug and Yeb, who begat Cthulhu and Tsathoggua. Even less is known about the Unnamed Darkness than about the Nameless Mist, though it can be assumed that it has abilities similar to Azathoth and Mist. I would say that it's safe to assume that it possesses the same omnipotence, immortality, reality, and space timey-wimey warping capabilities. It's thought that during the dream quest of Unknown Kadath, the character Randolph Carter actually came into direct contact with the Unnamed Darkness, as he is described as tumbling through an endless void of sentient blackness, which sounds a lot like darkness to me. Sadly, that's it. There was literally so few mentions of both these entities in the mythos. It's sad. I'd like to know more about them. While Lovecraft mentions them, even later authors such as Lynn Carter would not really expand upon their stories very much, or at all. I felt compelled to include them in my series on Lovecraftian deities, since that is what they are, as mysterious as they may be. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. Hello! My name is Meerah, and I'm a lore keeper in one of Yog Sothoth's libraries, and today I wanted to talk about the color out of space from the Lovecraft mythos. The color first appeared in the 1927 story of the same name by H.P. Lovecraft. The sentient color has also been called the Chromient, the spawn of the meteor, the space seeds, and the strange visitors. It was a scene from a vision of Fuseli, and over all the rest reigned that riot of luminous amorphousness, that alien and undimensioned rainbow of cryptic poison from the well, seething, feeling, lapping, reaching, scintillating, straining, and malignly bubbling in its cosmic and unrecognizable chromaticism. Many of my regulars may recognize this entity and story as a bit familiar from my Annihilation video, where I had mentioned that the book and movie were both inspired by the color out of space by Lovecraft to an extent. And it's really not hard to see why. The concept of an entirely alien being that takes the form of a sentient color is a pretty neat idea. Much like other entities we've covered here on the channel, like the Starspawn and the Migo specifically, the colors come from an area of outer space where the natural elements and laws differ entirely from those on Earth. Where exactly in outer space they come from is unknown. What we do know is that an adult color can create embryos, which are then shot out, which are then sent out to other worlds. To feed on the life there. In the story The Color Out of Space, a color hitches a ride on a meteor and crash lands into a farm in Massachusetts. There it germinates and grows into a jelly-like larva. While in its youth, the color will infest the local ecosystem, and the plants and the animals will begin to display signs of unnatural growth, appearing healthy and abundant, but producing bitter-tasting fruit. New animals born during this time will be deformed and mutated, and all of the living beings, plants, animals, and even humans in the affected area will begin to glow with the same alien bioluminescence as the color. This stage of a color's life lasts for a few months, after which it matures from a larva to a young color. It can now leave its lair for brief periods of time to feed on the land around it. The young color will now completely drain that ecosystem of all life within a 5-acre area. Plants, animals, and humans will display signs of this draining in that they age drastically and their skin turns gray and cracks. Once the color has drained a being, it is doomed to die. The area it has fed upon will, from that day forward, be completely desolate. As if the color has salted the very earth, no plants or animals will be able to grow there naturally ever again. Once the color has finished draining an area, it leaves the planet to return to space, where it will become an adult color. We see this entire process play out in the story The Color Out of Space, where a color fed off of a farm in Arkham, Massachusetts that once belonged to the Gardner family. The family were witness to the mutation of the plant life, the draining of their livestock, and ultimately to their own descent into madness and a decaying death. The area became known as the Blasted Heath, and though the color is supposed to have left once it's had its fill, rumor has it that a small piece was left behind, and that the valley continues to decay to this very day. But that's just a rumor. And sadly, that is the scope of what we know about the colors. They seem like a really fascinating race of beings, in my opinion, and I'd really like to know more about them, honestly. Like, what's their home world like? What do they do once they leave to become an adult? Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. Today, I wanted to talk about the dimensional Shamblers from the Lovecraft mythos. Their first confirmed appearance is in the 1933 story, The Horror in the Museum by H.P. Lovecraft, though it is suspected that the creatures are alluded to in Clark Ashton Smith's The Hunters from Beyond, which came out a year earlier. Shuffling towards him in the darkness was the gigantic, blasphemous form of a black thing, not wholly ape and not wholly insect. Its hide hung loosely upon its frame, and its rugose, dead-eyed rudiment of a head swayed drunkenly from side to side. Its forepaws were extended, with talons spread wide, and its whole body was taut with murderous malignity, despite its utter lack of facial expression. The dimensional Shamblers are alternatively known as the Dark Gatherers, Exolioptera, the Insects from the Void, Lurkers, the Hunters from Beyond, and the Shambling Things. Some believe them to come from the same dimension as Yog Sothoth. Their dimension is described as a gray oozing plain that is home to thousands upon thousands of dimensional Shamblers. Many believed that they were birthed in the deep passages of time to serve a higher power, perhaps Yog Sothoth or possibly Nyarlathotep. However, this is probably false, since they seem to move around with their own free will, and perhaps they occasionally choose to serve the outer gods or the great old ones, but aside from speaking to one outright, it's impossible to know for sure what their motives are. My guess is that they are simply hungry and enjoy the hunt. Some say that their appearance is short and ape-like, while others claim that they are massively tall and more resemble a canine. What is agreed upon is that they have fangs, talons, or claws, and are generally terrifying to behold. Unlike Yog Sothoth, they move between dimensions with ease, and frequently visit our plane of existence to hunt. Due to them being from another dimension, they are immaterial and cannot be touched or harmed. Many have claimed that they use a form of hypnosis on their victims, and also can call more of their brethren to help with the hunt. Once they've caught their prey, they drag it down into their own dimension of gray ooze, where the poor creature will then have its mind and soul feasted upon by the hunters. The dimensional Shamblers, much like many eldritch creatures, can be summoned to our dimension with the use of certain spells and rituals, and in some cases sheer willpower or fervent wishes, as the hunters do enjoy a good hunt, and so they will usually come when you call. Why one would choose to summon one is beyond me, however, as it seems they are impossible to control and choose their prey by their own will, meaning they could easily turn on their summoner at any time. The number of Shamblers in our plane of existence at any given time could be as high as 8,000 or 8,500, though how those numbers were generated and indeed how on earth they could be confirmed is again beyond me. And yeah, that is pretty much it. A short video this time, I'm sorry. The dimensional Shamblers are some of the most interesting Lovecraftian entities in my opinion, as they have free will and can traverse dimensions as they please, which are both things that are just not common among eldritch creatures. Like, eldritch beings don't tend to possess that skill. Most have to be summoned to exist on our plane of existence, so that's interesting. Sorry this one's so short. And today I'm going to be talking about the Shining Trapezohedron, a relic from the Lovecraft mythos. This video topic was suggested by this lovely commenter here. It was treasured and placed in its curious box by the crinoid things of Antarctica, salvaged from their ruins by the Serpent men of Valusia. The Shining Trapezohedron is first mentioned in H.P. Lovecraft's 1936 short story The Haunter of the Dark. It would appear again in 1950 in the sequel by Robert Bloch, The Shadow from the Steeple, and in many modern-day video games such as Conan Exiles and Sundered. How does one describe this object? If it can even be considered an object? Much like how one cannot simply describe an Elder Scroll or cannot simply walk into Mordor, it is much more complicated than calling it an enchanted gem. The Shining Trapezohedron is a device, I suppose, that peers through all of space and time, can reveal forbidden knowledge, show glimpses of other dimensions, realities, worlds, and even into the very mind of Yog Sothoth himself. It is rumored to be able to summon an avatar of Nyarlathotep, the Haunter of the Dark, and perhaps even avatars of other outer gods as well. While its origins are obscure, the legend goes that it was created on the planet of Yuggoth by the Mi-Go. After the Mi-Go came to Earth, and sometime during their conflict with the Elder Things took control of the Shining Trapezohedron. From there, it passed into the hands of the Serpentmen of Valusia, then the first humans on the lost continent of Lemuria, then to Atlantis, where it sank. From Atlantis, it came to be in the possession of Neferin-Ka, a pharaoh of ancient Egypt, where it sat undisturbed within his tomb until it was uncovered once more in 1843 by archaeologist Enoch Bowen. Bowen then took the Shining Trapezohedron home with him to Providence, Rhode Island in 1844, where it spawned the creation of the Church of Starry Wisdom. In the 1930s, it was researched by Robert Blake, who attempted to use it to summon Yog Sothoth unsuccessfully. Perhaps as a response to Blake's death in 1935, Dr. Ambrose Dexter threw the Shining Trapezohedron into the Narragansett Bay off the coast of Rhode Island. However, this was a dreadful mistake, as the perpetual darkness in the depths of the bay ensured the Haunter of the Dark's freedom, and Nyarlathotep possessed Dexter as a result. Using Dexter's meat puppet, Nyarlathotep had a hand in the creation of nuclear weapons, or so the story goes. No one knows the current location of the Shining Trapezohedron, though it could be assumed that it is either still in the bay or was swept out to sea. Maybe someone dredged it up, who knows? But yeah, that is a very brief summary of the Shining Trapezohedron, one of the big artifacts seen throughout the mythos. Thank you so much to everyone who's watching. If you enjoyed this, then please consider leaving a like or a comment for the algorithm, you know how it goes. Subscribe and ring the bell if you want notifications for future content, blah blah blah. And of course, a special thank you as always to my channel members. May Yog grant them the knowledge they seek, and I hope to see all of y'all next time here in the library.